Hello, today is February 28th, 2018, and this is a CSTA-hosted webinar. My name is Jessica Valenti from the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Please join me and my co-organizer, Michelle Ellington, CFTA President from the University of Kentucky, as we welcome today's presenters. Today's webinar is Autodesk and Esri, global leaders partnering to drive the integration of spatial intelligence and 3D design model information. I would like to welcome our presenters. Today we have Eric DeRoche, Business Strategy Manager from Autodesk, and Don Keeney, Product Manager from Esri. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on the CSTA YouTube channel shortly following today's webinar. The presentation is estimated to run 60 minutes with presentations from Autodesk and Esri. While we will not have an open Q&A, we welcome you to send questions using the questions dialog box, where we will compile them to follow up with our presenters. I can guarantee this will be a hot topic at this year's CFTA annual conference being hosted by The Ohio State University. With our pre-conference sessions, user presentations, and plenty of time with our business partners and vendors, on behalf of the CFTA Board of Directors, we hope to see you in Columbus. Don and Eric, thank you so much for being here today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello, everyone, and thanks to the association for hosting this event. My name's Eric DeRoche, and I'm going to walk you through the first segment of the presentation, which deals with an introduction to Autodesk and our relationship with Esri. So to get started, our vision is to help people imagine, design, and create a better world. We work across three distinct industries, namely manufacturing, media and entertainment, and what we call the AEC industry, architectural, engineering, and construction, which for us predominantly is divided into the building segment as well as infrastructure. If you were to look at how we look at the subsegments within AEC, the graph would look like this. Now, a lot of what I will say today, you'll find that I'll interchange AEC and infrastructure. But when I say infrastructure, predominantly for us, it's the left-hand side of this graphic. It's namely your residential and commercial buildings, along with transportation, land, and water. But first, let's take a look at what's going on out there in the world today. It's predicted that within about 20 years, we're going to have over 9 billion inhabitants on this planet. So we have a tremendous amount of population growth occurring. Also, coupled with that is they're predicting that approximately 75% of the world's population will live in cities. So again, a huge trend towards urbanization. If you were to look back 2 or 3 years, this graphic would show how that population is dispersed around the globe. Now looking ahead over the next 30 odd years, the graphic would change to this. So again, you're seeing tremendous population growth and urbanization that is impacting our business. What that means to this business of infrastructure is to keep pace with these trends, we need to build approximately 1,000 new buildings per day, and we have to spend in the vicinity of 3.3 trillion on infrastructure per year. Now today we're spending approximately 2 trillion, so there's a significant spending gap for infrastructure to keep pace. You could also say that these trends are placing huge demands on our industry to the point that these mega trends are emerging. Certainly globalization as companies compete for resources, port space, also our financial markets, which were at one time thought to be very separate and distinct, are now very interdependent. I think we can all agree that the world is being connected, not just through the internet, but through various other processes as well through the cloud. And of course, as we build this infrastructure, we have to ensure that it fits properly within our environment, it's sustainable, and of course it's resilient to all the changes that it may occur. Now this construction industry and the infrastructure we need to keep pace with these trends is significant. On average, it accounts for roughly 6% of our global GDP, and it employs over 220 million people. And this is the type of environment that many of our people find themselves working in. It's a very low margin business. There's a tremendous amount of risk associated with building this infrastructure. And all of the different stakeholders on the project site tend to operate in a very fragmented fashion. In fact, in this study coming out of the UK, which looked at both the economies of the UK and Germany, it looked at the construction market and saw where the labor productivity was much below the average total economy for these countries. In other words, we're working in an environment that, despite all the advent of technologies and things that we're aware of, this environment is still very, very analog in nature. In fact, in this study by McKinsey, they estimated that in the construction space, only 1.2% of revenue is put back into investment in terms of IoT and bringing new technologies forth. And you compare that to other industries such as manufacturing, where that same level of investment was more like 3.3%. So to close this gap, it's been estimated again by McKinsey that if we were able to completely move the workforce and the workflow process to a digital environment, we could close the gap and save 1.2 trillion per annum in savings towards this infrastructure. So how are we going to do that? And this is really what the relationship between Autodesk and Esri is focused upon. It's namely the initiative to bring the world of GIS together with the world of building information management, or the design build aspect of the business. So I think many of you are aware that at our Autodesk University event last November, the two heads of our companies met on stage and made the announcement regarding this partnership. So what I want to talk now is the Autodesk world, the right-hand side of this graphic. And as you know, our core business is on the design and build aspect of this infrastructure. We view ourselves as consumers of GIS data, not creators of it. So what better partner than Esri to help us consume the GIS data as we move around this life cycle? So this relationship is all about data interoperability and how we can move that data from the macro world of GIS into the micro and very detailed world of engineering. And to do that, or to show some of this, I wanted to talk a little bit more about BIM and the process of BIM. BIM is not a product, it's a process of how we share this data across all the stakeholders involved in an infrastructure program. And this graphic shows you that this evolution towards a BIM process is getting a tremendous amount of attention around the globe. And many of these countries, as you can see, are putting mandates in place and adopting the process in all their construction projects. So here's some examples of BIM being used today. This is the Museum of the Future in Dubai, and you can see that this structure has been modeled very accurately, and we're able to look at things like airflow throughout the structure. Everything is built in a very detailed parametric three-dimensional model, and all the stakeholders can look carefully at the design and look at things like clash detection and so forth, to ensure that at the end of the day, the data that was originally used in the design phase is used throughout the build phase as well. Here's another example which has a much more of a regional aspect to it. This is the Grand Paris program. And this is a project that got started because the city of Paris realized that they had to have a more efficient means by which to move people around their city. People living in the suburbs just couldn't get downtown to shop or to go to school or to work. So this is a program of several hundred kilometers of railroads, several stations. It's all being delivered and modeled and built within a complete BIM process. And this is one of our favorite ones. You'll recognize this as the Panama Canal. This was one of the first projects ever undertaken using the BIM process for data handover and data delivery. And because they were using a BIM process, they were able to save a tremendous amount of time in the schedule as well as cost and build this massive structure more efficiently. In fact, I think there's a statistic coming up here that shows that this broke a lot of records. In other words, for concrete and steel, I believe that something like enough steel was used to replicate 28 Eiffel Towers in this program. So again, these are all big infrastructure projects that are starting to realize the benefits of BIM. And in this study out of the UK a year ago, and they focused on the UK, McGraw-Hill for the study because the UK is one of the more mature countries of BIM adoption. And this graphic here represents the business value that BIM is delivering to the stakeholders, in this case, mainly the owners of such large infrastructure programs. So here at Autodesk, the challenge, and in our discussions with Esri, I believe they certainly are aligned with us on this, is that our challenge as companies is to help our stakeholders and the consumers of our products to build more and to build it better and to build it with less. And now as BIM is starting to gain traction around the globe, we're also pushing towards what we call connected BIM today, which as you might imagine is simply BIM plus the power of the cloud and how we can connect all the stakeholders throughout the ecosystem. And for Autodesk, this would look like this graphic. It's something we call BIM 360, which is built on our Forge platform and enables the stakeholders to have access to technology, data, analytics, and they can do that across the design, construction, and field execution, as well as the handover to the owner-operator. Recent studies by McKinsey indicated that there's 5 major fields of technology trends or evolution of technology that's impacting our world. And I just want to touch on a couple of these in the presentation today. And let's start a little bit with high definition survey. I think we're all aware of the tremendous progress it's made with platforms and sensor systems, be it aerial photography, satellite imagery, digital terrain models, the ability to put a lot of this on platforms like UAVs or drones, and the ability to capture a tremendous amount of data or field conditions and how we can bring that information into the design world. We're not only doing that in the air, we're also doing it on the ground in terms of our highways with mobile mapping systems, which again is an integrated platform containing digital cameras, inertial navigation, GPS sensors, and so forth. Here's an example of the Glen Canyon Dam. This dam holds back the 2nd largest reservoir in the US in Lake Powell. And the owners for this massive structure had a need to create a digital twin for training purposes, for maintenance purposes, and to ensure that they could operate this facility in a very effective manner. So they were able to leverage all of the advent of this technology, LiDAR, aerial imagery, GIS, stationary scanning, and completely capture the structure as it exists today and create a digital twin. So you have not only the physical structure, but you now have a digital structure that you can use for all those purposes. This is an example that's very similar to this again. This is a main postal station in London. And again, they're using all of these technologies to capture the real world and bring it into the digital space for design, maintenance, and so forth. Okay, I want to jump ahead a little bit now and talk about once we've captured the real world conditions and used it to build the context model, what are some of the advent of technologies in the IoT space or in the advanced analytics? And this is an example of a lot of very rich GIS content being used in conjunction with hydrology information for flood zone determination. And this is something that a lot of our infrastructure stakeholders find very important as they look at what are the impacts of flooding on the existing infrastructure as they're looking to retrofit or to build new infrastructure in that area. But we can also take the same context model, which includes the engineering and GIS data, and start looking at it for specific use cases in transportation as an example. What you're viewing here is the ability to change intersections and to shut down certain lanes or to sequence the lights differently. And through traffic simulation, look at the impact that would have on the flow of traffic in that particular area. Again, you can use the same model. In this case, a highway engineer, design engineer is going in. He's looking at this particular intersection and looking at how it could change based on line of sight due to that building and so forth. So again, there's the need to bring these two worlds of GIS and engineering together so that we can better plan for new infrastructure and the impact it would have. There's also a lot of work in the IoT space as it relates to how we monitor the success of this infrastructure as it relates to various things such as heating and cooling. Are buildings actually operating at the level of efficiency that they were designed to? And this fusion of IoT technology and real-time data is an important one in our space as well. And I'll end on the next advent of technology, and this is what we call generative design. Again, you can see starting with various GIS layers of imagery and content. This is a client of ours in the Nordics that wants to redevelop this parcel of land, and they're looking at several primary criteria that they'd like to maximize, like views, solar gain, backyard size, and so forth. And they're allowing the computer to ingest all this information and these parameters and weighting and do all the heavy lifting to try to optimize what is the best design for that parcel of land. So we're seeing a lot of generative design coming into our space. And another example of this is, again, going back to the mobile mapping technology, the ability to leverage reality capture to capture the field conditions, in this case, a highway corridor. And then we're able to teach the computer to automatically extract a lot of the features and furniture along this roadway corridor, such as stop signs, light poles, and so forth. So really what this partnership is all about is the ability to bring the world of GIS and BIM together as it relates to data interoperability and how we can eliminate this problem that I think has plagued our industry for a long, long time, and that is data loss and data handover as we move from one phase to another throughout the life cycle. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Eric. I'm going to switch things over to Don Keeney with Esri. And then just to let everyone know, as we wrap up, I'm going to facilitate a little bit of question and answer between the two presenters before we conclude. So with that, Don, you should have control.
All right, thank you very much, Jessica. My name is, again, is Don Keeney. I'm a 3D product manager at Esri, where I've been focusing on AEC, CAD, and now ever increasingly BIM for the last 25 years at Esri. And I think Eric did a really good job of giving us an idea of the benefits and the driving forces behind this partnership. As a product manager, I'm tasked to really look into how we can better move forward to create real solutions surrounding these pent-up needs One of the things I think that we can all appreciate is that we're trying to make the life cycle process of infrastructure easier. And so a lot of times we see a lot of different wheels that depict, the planning, construction management, and different versions of that wheel. And I think for some time there has been this artificial competition of pushing or of chasing around the life cycle between different vendors. And I think that the market has really matured. I think that the industries have matured to the point where there's really a synergy that has emerged between the way these different technologies have evolved, to the point where I think there's a pretty clear delineation between how these things can work together, from the fusion of GIS and BIM information. So that really, it can really boil down to a really simple understanding that GIS can help inform the BIM process. A lot of the design constraints that you work with in design come from information that can be provided in a BIM format. Likewise, the outcome of infrastructure then becomes the base map, or it becomes the spatial infrastructure that you can then map off of. So the same assets that you're building then become the existing condition, and the cycle continues. The interactions between the different phases of interoperability, I think this image here really is designed to depict motion, right? That information is flowing freely, and I think we could really complicate it by really connecting lines between, really every phase in the project. There's not just a one handoff here in the intersection in the middle. There's really value in having access to the information that you need throughout the design and the construction process, as well as different phases of planning and regulating and permitting. So Eric talked a lot about this real pressure or move to improve the building process, and it's obvious in the map that he showed of all these countries that are mandating BIM because it works. And the reason why it works, I think primarily is because of the reduction in uncertainty, right? Through the digital twin concept and virtual construction, a lot of the problems that can arise from a fragmented workflow become to light. And so information really becomes the key. So in a geographic information system and in a building information modeling or management system, that information is the key component that needs to freely flow back and forth. Oftentimes that information is a byproduct or a secondary function, but in the process, for example, of designing something, there's information about the assets that are involved in building it. Although it was in a BIM process, you might be defining how to construct something. Having that information available in operations and maintenance or an asset management system, there's great value in repurposing that. So like I said, as a product manager at Esri, I'm one of the many people that have been tasked for talking about and road mapping where we should go next. One of the reasons that we can really be having this conversation is that in the last couple of years, the technologies have risen to a point where a lot of this information flow can really be possible. The products at Esri have been greatly enhanced in the area of 3D. Even in the last 3 years, there's been a lot of work done to improve the ability for a GIS to really be a true 3D platform. We've created a number of different technologies to allow us to store and stream huge amounts of information, even in mobile and web experiences. This is an example of our 3D objects, which are a cached data format where I can easily browse through millions of these buildings, these textured buildings, and using different forms of optimization, just be able to provide graphics and data information in a visibility streaming environment that's optimized for those types of experiences. We have another format that's often the result of drone captured information, the 3D mesh. It looks similar when you're experiencing it, but different than the individual 3D objects. This is a continuous surface that I can use to visualize large amounts of information. We've also created a point cloud type of cached viewing system to work with huge amounts of LiDAR data in a mapping context. And each one of these are also able to be put together with other GIS information in 2D and 3D experiences. The 3D information in a GIS is not only geographic in nature. A lot of times it can be used for 3D geoanalytics, being able to look at sensor information and different types of demographic information in 3D, using really the globe as a background to displaying reality. One of the patterns that we see emerging is this ability. If you look here, pay attention on the right-hand side, I have some 3D objects. And we've had one of our distributors was working just using the existing APIs to build a platform connection between BIM 360 and our web scene technologies. So a shell of a building was linked to documents in BIM 360, and through the Forge platform was able to connect to a BIM model that represents the actual building. On the left-hand side, a common type of interoperability would be to do things like have a backpack that can sense information within a building, and through a scan to BIM process, also connect information to imagery. GIS can also be a very powerful framework for supplying information in AR and VR experiences, both in the facilities maintenance or facilities management and operations and maintenance, but also in virtual construction scenarios. We also see patterns that I think that will continue, this idea of supplying GIS information and AEC design tools. We have a product, ArcGIS for AutoCAD, for example, that allows people to be within Autodesk AutoCAD, but also connect to GIS services in the form of maps and features, so that they have direct access to the GIS information that oftentimes is the design constraints for their work. We're looking at other types of AEC design tools where we can continue to repeat this type of a pattern. And that pattern looks like you're working potentially in a design tool where you can generate content both in a file that a GIS can understand, but also taking information through the ArcGIS GIS platform in the form of services, being able to access GIS services information from those design tools and make transactions against the data stored in a GIS through web services. And one of the advantages of doing that type of work is that the GIS platform provides the same services to many different experiences to do things like data field collection. The same services that are working in the design tool can also be used in operations and maintenance dashboards. It's the same services that are used in web mapping and in desktop GIS. You actually do have the capabilities now through sometimes a somewhat complex system of data conversion to get information from BIM into a GIS, but we really want to make that whole workflow easier. One of the things that I really appreciated about that meeting at AU, where the CEOs of the two companies were talking on stage together, was really the desire and the commitment to reduce obstacles between sharing information. And so one of the things that we're doing at Esri in the near term is working on directly reading Revit BIM model files. Being able to simply open up a BIM model and pull information out of it. And so as we do that, we certainly recognize that there's nothing necessarily magic about a BIM model to have any type of information in it. As we work with different customers and they're looking at their requirements and their needs, we quickly realize that there's different types of Revit models and BIM processes that generate different types of information. So we want to create tools that are flexible and can provide the most value to the most amount of people. And so one of the things that we realized that we could really categorize the two different needs for accessing BIM information. One is that people are looking to just simply see the information in its geographic context. You know, there's a new development coming, a new building, and they want to see how it fits into the real world. And so simply being able to visualize that BIM model in different GIS experiences is very useful. We also recognize that people are looking to harvest information, rich content from BIM models to fuel other types of GIS applications. Being able to pull asset information out of a building and use it in facilities management and asset management and 3D campus models of different sorts. So being able to use BIM information for visualization, but also being able to use BIM information as a source of geographic content. And so one of the things that we're doing in a really practical way is following a similar pattern that we use to read CAD drawings. We simply break up a CAD drawing and read it virtually as a GIS data set and categorize it so it's easy for our tools to use. So following that same idea for Revit, a CAD file can have some levels of organization, but a Revit model really is a much more defined and rich, has a much more rich semantic content. And it's easy for us to take a look at, for example, the categories of a Revit model and map those directly to feature classes. So, so looking at, data inside of Revit, we know that there can be lots of different rich attribution information that people want to put into a Revit model. So we want to be able to get both that 3D information from its geometries, but also its rich attribute content as well. So the ability to, open up a Revit model and then see it as a valid GIS input, and then simply add it to a map without having to go through a complex conversion process. Seeing not only the 3D geometry information, but directly accessing its attribute information in this GIS context. We recognize that that once we have it in a GIS format, we can share it out as some of those cached 3D scene types of data sets like the 3D objects layer. But we also realize that because of the potentially rich and deep and dense data, that there's more work that we can do. Here on the left-hand side, there's an example of working with the city of San Francisco, and one of our developers has actually shrunken this entire city of San Francisco and placed it on top of another building. So sometimes the way I like to say it is that we do have some very powerful and rich tools to visualize things in 3D, but some of the stuff that we need to work on in integrating BIM, and especially in a city context, is not only being able to look at millions of buildings, but also millions of assets and millions of buildings. So that's some of the research that's going on at Esri at this time. We also recognize that that BIM is not only just buildings, but it's civil infrastructure. So some of the workflows that we're currently looking at are improving the flow of information from civil as just as important as buildings. And there certainly is a lot of work that that we can do. And one of the things that I'm really excited to hear is the questions that you have after the fact, because I think this group of many different types of groups is one that really can speak into this interoperability and collaboration workflow and help guide us to what are the best paths to move forward, because you guys are working in campuses and a constant state of building new things and fitting them within the existing environment, and you know, working with construction and management of different assets. So that's kind of what I had, and I really would like to, you know, send out an invitation for you guys to send in comments and questions. What could I have?
Excellent. Thank you so much to both Don and Eric. I have a couple follow-up questions here that I hope will facilitate some discussion from the both of you. And I think one of the top questions on everyone's mind right now is what we should expect in the near term from you guys, as well as beyond.
Hi, this is Eric. I'll go ahead and jump in first, Don. Well, first, Autodesk is a publicly traded company. We don't speculate as to the timing and the details of any product offerings or future product offerings. But I would just stress that the focus of our discussion and relationship with Esri is really based on placing data at the center of this challenge, and trying to do so through the lens of the customer. And certainly, as you heard both Don and I message, the whole challenge is how can we make the seamless flow of data between our two systems work for our mutual customers. And to that end, we believe that this challenge has been around a long time. This issue of data loss and data handover as we move from one phase to another along the life cycle of an asset. And that's causing a tremendous amount of inefficiency, raising the cost of all of our programs around the world. And I don't care where you live and what type of project you're involved in, if it involves building the infrastructure that we all need to live and enjoy the planet, they share two common threads. One is they're all over budget and over schedule. And I think the success that we've seen with BIM in the vertical building space is now, as Don rightfully pointed, is being adopted in the horizontal space too, horizontal BIM, if you will, for civil infrastructure. So really, again, from my feedback on this is that we're really trying to place data at the center and do it in a way that will seamlessly move that data through these two environments.
Yeah, and sure, I'll just simply echo that. At Esri, you know, we're looking at a huge, you know, really pent-up demand for making things easier, and so reducing obstacles for interoperability of, you know, services and data and repositories. You look at the spectrum of products that Autodesk offers in the design space, and you look at the platform of Esri and how it can organize data and disseminate information in different, you know, different working environments. You know, we're really looking at making information available to people where they need it. And so, some of the work that we're doing in both the short term and the longer term is, breaking down those barriers to get access to information where you need it. So getting the GIS context within the design applications, and also being able to repurpose and not have to create lots of copies of data to update the base map, the current state of reality.
Okay. I'm really curious about exactly how, Esri and Autodesk people are really working together, and sort of more about the business relationship that you guys are developing here.
Hi, this is Eric again. I'll jump in first again, Don. I think when the two organizations came together, what I remember is Jack Dangerman looking me in the eye and basically saying, if we're going to do this, we better like each other. And certainly, I think as we explored the opportunity, it became evident that both Autodesk and Esri have a very rich culture in being stewards of the environment. I think we share the same beliefs that our world needs to be built in a sustainable and resilient manner that coexists in harmony with the environment, if you will. So we're aligned on this challenge, and certainly because of many of the things I pointed to, like population growth, urbanization, globalization, there's a sense of urgency that we have to do this. We have to do more, we have to build it better, and we have to do it with less resources. So I think we share all of those fundamental beliefs between our organizations. And certainly at this point in time, I'd say that we're putting a tremendous amount of emphasis on bringing all the right stakeholders together from both organizations, becoming aware and familiar with each other's technology and product portfolios, and again, how we can leverage all the rich talent on both sides to bring these environments together. And I know through my presentation, you heard me reference bringing the macro world of GIS together with the micro world of engineering. But some of the analogies that have been used in our discussions is that, you can look at it as though Esri's the library and Autodesk is the books within that library. Or Esri's the forest and Autodesk is the trees within the forest. And the type of user experience that we would like to come out of this relationship, if you can imagine being in outer space and you're flying into the Earth and the resolution's improving as you get closer and closer, right down to the county level, the city level, the building level, and then you can fly inside that building and you can get right down to the details of seeing the doors and the doorknobs and the door hinges. So that type of visualization or user experience is what we mean when we say the seamless flow of data. I think we're at a point with today's technology that this issue of having to import and export and convert formats of data so that you can move from one system to another, we're beyond that. That data should flow seamlessly and transparently to the user. And similarly from the business model aspect, that licensing of software technology and having to exit out of an Autodesk program to log in with credentials into an Esri software product. We're trying to remove all that messy stuff and let the back-end office handle all of that so that the user can focus on what they want to do, and that is looking at how GIS data serves as a context model into the design of their project, or how that design model can move back into the GIS for asset management to more effectively operate.
Yeah, this is Don. I would certainly. Oh yeah, yes, certainly. I would definitely, echo all of those things. And then, the other thing I might add to that is that, in working together with Autodesk, at the center of all of this is our joint customers. People like yourselves on this call that already, are working in both environments, and we really, are very interested in hearing from you, the directions and the priorities that we should take, and so there's a huge emphasis from both of us to listen to what people really want to do and not dictate, how things should work, but that they should work better, and they should work better for real people doing real work in the real world.
Okay, so that leads me to ask why now, and I think you both sort of touched on this a little bit, but that has me curious what it is about this moment.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in first this time, Eric. This is Don. I think, part of it, that I touched on in my presentation was about technology. Technology has taken us to a place where there are new capabilities in our software. There are complementary technologies. There's a lot of forces in the industry that have, to some point, caused more differentiation in our different platforms and product lines, to the point where no one company can do everything, right? And so there's just a new opportunity to collaborate at a kind of a more of across the board level, because there's so much work to be done, and these are two companies that are really good at what they do.
Yeah, just to emphasize that, I think we realize through all these studies and much of what we've presented to you today that there's a lot of trends going on out there that we can't stop. We can't stop population growth. We can't discount the fact that a lot of people want to live in cities. These trends and mega trends are creating a tremendous challenge for society, and that challenge is how do we close that infrastructure spending gap that I referenced? And we, like many of the analysts, believe that it can be done through technology, and the technology that exists in companies like Autodesk and Esri. And to close that gap, we can't just build our way out of the problem. We need to digitize the workplace. And if we're going to do that, it all starts with this seamless flow of data that both Don and I have been messaging here. And so that's why we see the sense of urgency and the time being now to bring these companies together to tackle this challenge. We think we can go a long ways towards solving this challenge. And I would also message at this time that I would want our listeners to be aware that we're definitely aware of the fact that these two organizations are different in many ways. Although we share the same beliefs, you've got a publicly traded company in Autodesk working now with a privately held organization in Esri. We're not as nimble as Esri potentially can be. So there's going to be challenges along this path and this partnership, and we just continue to be patient with each other, understand the different environments in which we work, and are working through some of those challenges as we go.
Wow, that's great. So Eric, along those lines too, it seems like, I think to a lot of us, there is some overlap in functionality between what both of you offer. And so I think we would wonder how you see that kind of working out through this.
Again, this is Eric. Yes, obviously there's overlap, but I think both organizations are fully prepared to take a step back, look at the big picture of what we can achieve together in this relationship, and work through those overlap areas or those gray areas. And the way I would message it, Jessica, is that we're basically looking at it once again through the eyes of our customers. What's best for our customers? And we believe data interoperability goes a long way in terms of allowing them to extend their reach across that life cycle, to share that data with other stakeholders, and to be more competitive in the marketplace. So as long as we keep centered on the customer and keep focused on the big picture, long-term value that the relationship will bring, we'll certainly get through any of the overlapping issues and gray areas that are there between the relationships.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. And I think the other thing I would add to that is that you know, when there is overlap in one product or another product at Autodesk or Esri, oftentimes the person who's actually doing the work is a different person. It's a different user. We call them personas. It's in one case it may be a civil engineer or an architect, and another time it's someone in a planning department. Although they may both be doing 3D visualization to get their job done. Oftentimes there's going to be a best in breed solution to get their work done in the way that they need to do it. So, and when there is just a choice, I don't think that in the big picture is going to be that big of a problem.
Great. Thank you both. I think we all recognize that this is a relatively new relationship that still has a lot to be worked out, but I tremendously appreciate you guys taking the time to be with us today and give us as much information as you can about what the intent is here and where both of you were coming from. With that, I know that Don had said our organization, CFTA, is a place where you hope to hear more from, especially for us, the owners, information about what would help us. And so I will also make the plug right now that I think a great opportunity for people to be able to have direct interaction. It's going to be this summer at the CFTA annual conference at The Ohio State University, as one place where Esri and Autodesk will be and be available to talk to folks about how we're using it. So with that, I think we're going to wind down the webinar at this point. I thank all of our attendees who joined us today. As a reminder for anyone whose organization was not able to attend or others, we were recording this session and will be made available, and we'll be sending out information on access to that. Call for abstracts for the CFTA conference ends today, so I encourage anyone who is interested in attending and has something exciting to share, please do. Registration is open, and we have already a series of upcoming webinars that were already in the works for planning, and notices will be coming out to all of you through the listserv for those webinars that are coming up down the line. So with that, unless Eric or Don, you have any closing remarks for us?
No, I would just say well done, Don. Jessica, thank you, and thank you for to the association and all the listeners today for tuning in.
Yeah, Jessica, thanks for the opportunity to share. Thanks.
Thank you. It was our pleasure, and we look forward to hearing more from both Esri and Autodesk in the future. And with that, I will bring this webinar to a close. Thank you all for joining us.